We begin with Canada and India agreeing to relaunch negotiations on a new trade deal. This development was confirmed shortly after Prime Minister Mark Carney and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi met on the sidelines of the G20 summit in South Africa this past weekend. It's the latest sign diplomatic relations between the two countries are thawing after a major fallout in 2023. That's when Canadian officials accused Indian agents of being linked to the murder of Sikh activist Hardeep Singh Nijjar here on Canadian soil. But in spite of that, trade talks will resume.
You can be both a reliable trading partner and there will be some sources of friction. Canada has quite an actual strong commercial relationship with India. We are one of the largest, for example, foreign investors in India. Canada is. And there have been tight ties. What we're looking to do is to put that on a sound footing.
Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand joins me now. Minister, it's good to see you. I know you've had long flights coming back from the G20. We appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me, David.
We've got a few things to go through, but let's start with the trade talks with India. The Prime Minister says this trade deal could double Canada-India trade to $70 billion by around 2030. What exactly do you see this looking like, this deepening of the trade relationship with India?
Well, I want to start off, David, by saying that since the beginning, we've been taking this relationship step by step. The first step, of course, is to ensure that the security dialogue between the countries continues at a high level. It means that we have to respect the rule of law and territorial integrity and ensure that public safety and security is at the very top of the foreign policy agenda as we go through the step-by-step approach. The next step, of course, was the mutual appointment of high commissioners. The third step was the joint statement and framework that we put in place, indicating the importance of the rule of law and the security and law enforcement dialogue, as well as the various areas, the sectors on which we can potentially collaborate, from AI to agriculture and agri-food to energy and people-to-people ties. Those were contained in the joint statement put out by the foreign ministers in October. And so that brings us to the meeting between the leaders at the G20, in which the Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement was launched in terms of the negotiations by the two leaders, moving forward with alacrity to ensure that many sectors of the economy will be subsumed in those negotiations with an agreement as soon as possible.
Right, so there's the economic partnership, which, look, when you look at the size of the population, the size of the market, it's an easy choice to make. But when you look at that public safety side and security side that you mentioned, there's a lot of Canadians going to say, wait a minute now, because there was the allegation that Prime Minister Trudeau made in the House of Commons that day about agents of the Indian government being connected to the murder of Mr. Nijjar. And since then, since the talks have resumed, we've still heard of Sikh activists getting warnings from the RCMP saying that they may be in danger. So I mean, how do we calibrate this and justify this when the transnational repression seemingly hasn't stopped?
It is extremely important to take these types of issues very seriously, as we do. And that is why I started by stressing the importance of the law enforcement dialogue across all topics: foreign interference, transnational repression, and going forward, public safety generally. And that's not just with India, it's with all countries. Public safety and security is always our top priority as a government. At the same time, we are recalibrating the economic relationship and making sure that the law enforcement agencies do their work as we continue to build trade relationships with a number of countries. And I just want to say, you know, as a former law professor, I will say that the rule of law depends on democratic institutions being able to carry out their functions separate from the work of the executive and legislative branches of government. And that's exactly what is continuing to occur in terms of RCMP investigations, in terms of the judicial processes. These are independent institutions of the government per se, and they need to be able to do the work, and that's exactly what they're doing on law enforcement in this and other cases.
Right, but has India tangibly changed its level of cooperation on the investigations into Mr. Nijjar's murder? Have they agreed to better information sharing? Have they agreed to more help? Because this has been sort of the frustration in a lot of these. And if, you know, normalizing relations and beginning trade talks, I don't know if that gives you leverage or reduces your leverage, because we're the ones looking for new trading partners because of the U.S. right now. I mean, what has tangibly changed on the public safety and cooperation side of things?
Well, first and foremost, the discussion at the highest levels between our officials on law enforcement. Secondly, the fact that when we issued the joint statement back in October, the entire first page was dedicated to issues relating to the rule of law, issues relating to territorial integrity, and issues relating to public safety. So again, back to the step-by-step approach, that's the first step in the relationship. From there, we moved to a discussion about what is the potential here in terms of the economic relationship. And Canada is the 7th largest investor in India as it stands. So what this comprehensive economic partnership agreement negotiations will ensure occurs is the growth of an already strong economic relationship against the backdrop of the law enforcement dialogue, of course.
Right, but as I referenced, Sikh activists are still getting warnings. We saw the CSIS director, Dan Rogers, saying the threat has not gone away and that the agency has remained very vigilant, right? So, I mean, how comfortable are you as Foreign Affairs Minister that the government of India has changed on this front?
I, as Foreign Affairs Minister, am very committed to ensuring that that law enforcement dialogue between our officials occurs on a continuous basis. It's not one and done. It's going to continue. Furthermore, I believe in democratic institutions and the work that they must do under their mandate and purview. And that includes entrusting and ensuring that the RCMP is able to do their work and that the court system is able to function as it does in this country, independent from government.
The agenda that the Prime Minister has staked out on seeking capital and trade globally, the $70 billion direct foreign investment agreement with the Emirates, the UAE, that was announced prior to going to the G20 and the meeting with India, a desire to re-engage with China, potentially even visiting there at a certain point. There is getting back into business with people we had gotten out of business for various reasons, but also it seems to be a direct re-engagement with the Global South, some of the BRICS nations, with the obvious exception of Russia. I mean, what does this tell us about the direction this government wants to go in the hunt for capital and trading opportunities?
Well, the fundamental point that must be made in response to this question is that the global trading environment has fundamentally changed. Therefore, it is necessary for Canada as well to change its focus in terms of our foreign policy. The United States, of course, is also reordering its trading relationship, and in response, we are going to double non-U.S. trade by 2035, in the next 10 years. And so the work to do that, of course, is diversifying supply chains and diversifying trading partners. We have trading relationships under multilateral agreements. We are working to leverage the capacity for Canadian investment through those trading agreements, and we are working on additional new partnerships. That $70 billion that you referenced in terms of the UAE investment pledge to Canada, that's absolutely significant. It will change the game, and especially in terms of the national projects and the budget that we were able to have passed in the House of Commons last week.
But like the human rights issues around some of these countries, India, China, the criticism of the UAE for funding a militia in Sudan, there are challenges that come with this. And I wonder, it's easy to say we need to do more with Europe. I don't think we're going to need to worry about transnational repression from the United Kingdom, for example. Is there a difference in the depths of the entanglements you can have, trade-wise and otherwise, based on the nature of the country you're
I
dealing
want to say strongly that the core values of our country, be it environmental sustainability, be it reconciliation with Indigenous peoples, be it protecting democratic institutions against transnational repression, be it public safety writ large, we have those infused in our foreign policy. We are not retreating from our core values. At the same time, we are ensuring responsibly that we are building our trade relationships and that we are defending and protecting our country. I laid out those 3 foreign policy goals in my speech to the United Nations on September 29th. And so we are recalibrating our relationships around the world. And I'll say, David, it's not the case that human rights aren't important. What is the case is that we are engaging in a type of diplomacy where we raise issues of concern at the table with countries in order for them to hear that these values are indeed of interest to Canada and Canadians.
There's a lot of diplomacy happening right now about this possible peace plan floated by the United States for Ukraine. 28-point peace plan with a deadline maybe of Thursday to accept it. Does mean giving up territory. I mean, how does Canada view what is being proposed here? And do you see a world where there can be peace without Ukraine ceding some of its land?
Ukraine's territorial integrity is fundamentally important to the success of the ceasefire that is being negotiated and the long-term safety and security of Ukraine. Ukraine must be at the table, not on the table. Ukraine, in terms of its sanctity, sovereignty, and territorial integrity, is now in a place where the support that we are offering and European countries are offering is fundamentally significant. And from Canada's standpoint, we've put $22 billion on the table already for Ukraine. We believe in the rules-based international order, and we believe that Ukraine's fight is also the fight for democracy and the rules-based order writ large.
Are you comfortable with the peace deal, though, on the terms that have
on
been
the terms,
publicly?
as I said, territorial integrity. What does that mean? Luhansk, Donetsk, Crimea. These are fundamentally significant geographical areas for Ukraine on the eastern flank. Ukraine has been fighting very, very difficult circumstances throughout the last 3.5 years. And again, the territorial integrity of Ukraine is central. Let's talk about another aspect of the plan, though, NATO membership. NATO membership is not something that can be decided by anyone else other than the NATO members themselves within the NATO organization.
Right.
I'm going to be heading to NATO next week, and I'm sure that we will be having a conversation about this very issue. But let's just say that these plans are very complex. The head of our NSIA has been in Switzerland with her counterparts from across Europe to continue this negotiation and discussion. The Prime Minister's been in touch with his counterparts in Europe. Let's just say it's a fluid situation, but Canada's goals for Ukraine and supporting Ukraine are clear.
Okay, Minister, I've gone way over time, but we've just published a story on our webpage. Ottawa, Alberta agree to broad outlines of energy deal, including support for pipeline. The Prime Minister and the Premier of Alberta are going to announce this in Calgary on Thursday. There's going to be a Chamber of Commerce event, a joint press conference. Do you know about this? What can you tell us about this? What does the MOU between Ottawa and Alberta mean?
Well, thank you for the question. Let me say that we've been working very well across provinces and territories, and I know that Minister Hodgson will have more to say in the coming days.
Okay. Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand, we appreciate your time. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks, David.
Canada and India have agreed to relaunch negotiations for a new trade deal. Prime Minister Mark Carney and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi met at the G20 Leaders Summit this weekend. Prior to that meeting, Carney spoke of the benefit of having such a deal with India.
What I will say with respect to India is that we don't have a comprehensive economic partnership agreement with India, one of the world's largest and fastest growing economies. The ability to have more effective trade with them, to scale that trade with them, would be greatly helped by that.
Vina Nadjibulla is Vice President of Research and Strategy at the Asia Pacific Foundation of Canada, and she joins me now. Vina, it's good to see you. Thank you for being here today.
Nice to see you too. Thanks, David.
Well, as luck would have it, you're in New Delhi as we speak. I wonder, what is your assessment of Canada starting negotiations for a new trade deal with India?
Well, we're seeing big developments on the Canada-India file. The reset is not only continuing, but it is deepening and it's accelerating. And I think the focus is going to be on commercial and economic relations, hence the announcement of this comprehensive economic partnership. And I think what's notable is that this is not a restart of what we had paused because of the diplomatic crisis. Both governments are signaling that this is about something else, something more ambitious, something that is fit for the current moment, that will look at issues around innovation, technology, as well as AI and digital services. So areas which have traditionally been our strength around energy and agriculture, but also newer things. So it's not just a reset or restart, it's actually doing something a lot more ambitious given the current moment.
So what Prime Minister Carney is saying is that Canada is, in his words, re-engaging pragmatically with global giants like India. He described India as a reliable partner in terms of trade, which is, well, that's a shift in the characterization of the relationship. What do you make of the way the Prime Minister is framing the relationship between Canada and India?
Yeah, so I think you're right. Pragmatic is definitely the right word. There's also recognition that India is now the fourth largest economy and likely to be the third largest economy by 2030. That it is sort of a market of the size and complementarity to Canada that we simply cannot ignore if our agenda is to diversify trade and reduce over-reliance. So just simply pragmatically speaking, India needs to be part of that diversification agenda. Now, in answering whether India is reliable, I think the Prime Minister was very careful with his words. He said on trade, they are reliable, in that there aren't really issues that we've had on trade so much. I mean, yes, India is protectionist and doesn't want to open its market, but it's not that it's unique to Canada. It's essentially what they're doing domestically. Whereas the issues that we have with them have to do with foreign interference and so forth. And he said, on those issues, we need to remain vigilant. We're going back, David, to Prime Minister's idea that we can have different types of engagement with different countries that serve our national interests. So with India, we'll do certain things. With EU, we'll be doing a lot more things. So in other words, engagement, but different kind of engagement.
It's still, it's a difficult thing for a lot of Canadians to accept, right? The RCMP is still giving warnings to Sikh activists here in Canada that they are at risk, you know, for people working on. There was an independence referendum in Ottawa on Sunday, for example, the day Prime Minister Carney sat down with Narendra Modi. I mean, how do you expect them to manage that? Because the foreign interference and transnational repression, these are significant and live issues between the two, and they are not resolved even with this shift in the posture towards the two governments.
These are difficult and serious issues. And I think the way that Prime Minister Carney and his government are framing these issues is that they have to be dealt with through the law enforcement channel. So, and which is why it's interesting, in the readout from the meeting, Prime Minister Carney's readout said that he welcomed progress being made in the law enforcement dialogue. Now, I noted that that didn't appear in the Indian readout of it, so that's interesting in itself. But it seems like for Prime Minister Carney and others, the focus is on establishing law enforcement dialogue, on building trust, on framing this as a mutual shared concern for which they want to get Indian government's cooperation. And now I'm in New Delhi, as you mentioned, and it's been interesting to see how there is a shift in tone and shift in how Indians are speaking about these issues. So a lot more forward-leaning, even in conversations with a civil society representative like myself. So I think there is a lot more cooperation, and that's certainly the message we're also getting from the High Commissioner in Ottawa, sort of the tone that says now we will cooperate, we are engaged in dialogue. So this is a bet that the government is making. They're essentially saying, let's rebuild the relationship. Let's move on areas which is in mutual benefit. We both need economic diversification right now. We both need supply chains which are resilient, so which are not dependent on either US or China. So let's move on that. And in the meantime, let's have dialogue, let's have accountability, and that's going to take time. And of course, we don't know the details of that. And that's, of course, hard start for Canadians who might want answers sooner rather than later.
Right. Well, that is one of the problems. They talk about progress on a law enforcement dialogue, but it's never really kind of substantiated or itemized in public in terms of exactly what that means, right? So it leads to some skepticism on that point, right? Especially when you look at what is happening with the U.S. This is motivated by working with reliable countries. You know, we're not worried necessarily about Swedish transnational repression, for example, like we are with India. But, you know, the market is enormous. The population is enormous. They're estimating potential trade deal will increase two-way trade to $70 billion Canadian by 2030. Does that seem reasonable to you? I mean, what is the impact that can kind of have on the Canadian economy?
Yeah, so that is basically slightly more than doubling our current trade. So the bilateral trade in last year was about 30 billion. Now, interestingly, a lot of that, about 20 billion of that, is services trade. And that's services that Canadians provide to India. So largely around financial services and universities and tourism and so forth. So it'll be interesting what doubling of that could look like, given some of the other pressures, notably in university and foreign students and so forth. But in terms of doubling our goods trade, a lot of opportunities exist in the energy sector, certainly, both conventional as well as clean energy, including nuclear energy, uranium. Agriculture, of course, is big. But now we're also seeing this new partnership, David, on innovation and technology, one that we're launching not just with India, but also trilaterally with Australia. And it has everything to do with resilient supply chains, with critical minerals. Of course, we have a lot of that. India also wants to explore. We can partner on refining, which is really the area where China has the most dominance, controlling 90%. So I think if we move on those new sectors, and especially now that there's some conversation even on moving on defense industrial cooperation, something that would have been really difficult to imagine a year ago, but that is part of the conversation now. It is doable. And 2030, interestingly, is just 5 years, less than 5 years away. So I think both governments are being ambitious. It's not about doubling in 10 years. They're saying we can do this by 2030.
Right.
Let's get an agreement. Let's create predictability. And let's build on areas which are working already. Investment. Canadians are already big investors in India. So a lot to work. So yes, possible, but of course we need to do a lot of work to get there.
Okay, we got about 60 seconds left. I look at India, I look at the desire to re-engage with China. I look at Mark Carney going to the Emirates to tap into their sovereign wealth fund. The diversification play that he's making. Obviously Europe was, I think, the first visit and kind of the easiest one, but he's re-engaging with the big economies of the global south, going to the parts of the world that Canada has often not sought business deals with. I mean, what does it tell you, just at a high level, about the Prime Minister's agenda here?
Well, because we don't have a choice. I mean, if we could only do business with Europe and somehow that was enough, then I think we could have stopped there. But the reality is that in order to reduce over-reliance on the US, we've got to do business with many more partners. And yes, some of them are going to be much more challenging to deal with. This is a new era in Canadian foreign policy. We're going to be much more pragmatic, and the world is noticing. I mean, certainly here in India, they have noticed it. And wherever I travel in the Indo-Pacific, people are paying attention. They're listening to what Prime Minister Carney is saying, that Canada is now going to engage around national interests and shared interests in these plurilateral groups. So with a few countries rather than with everybody.
Vina Nadjibulla, Vice President at the Asia Pacific Foundation of Canada. We always appreciate the time and the insight. Thank you.
Thank you.